Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Danielle. Thank you for joining me on this lovely Thursday, September 10th, I believe. We are 4 days, I think my math is correct there. We are 4 days away from the start of the NFL season. I'm recording this on a Tuesday night, and the Heat beat the Bucks in 5 games, which is absolutely crazy. Sports are going wild. It feels really weird to have hockey and basketball going on while football is starting. Obviously, hockey usually continues, but it's just a weird feeling. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. I hope you guys are having a great Thursday. Like I said, I hope you all had a safe and healthy and socially distant Labor Day. I had a hectic weekend, like I mentioned on last podcast. I had one of my best friend's birthday on Friday, and then on Saturday, through Monday, I kind of just hung out, laid low. I was socially distant, hung out in like groups of 4 people at most. We all wore masks, and it was a very safe weekend. I had a lot of fun. It was very nice to kick back. I watched a lot of college football, as we'll get into today. But yes, I'm recording this on a Tuesday night at about 7:17 p.m. when I'm starting this, to be exact. Usually I like to record these on Tuesday in the morning, but like I mentioned, I was not on my phone or computer too much this weekend. I was watching a lot of football, but other than that, I was really just trying to soak in time with my friends and loved ones, I guess. My sorority's bid day is today, so I also had some sorority stuff to do. But yeah, I had a really great weekend, and I hope you guys all did as well. You wear your mask, you stayed safe. The pandemic isn't over just because you're over it. There's like this TikTok that says that, and I think it's very true. I read this really good article today by Charlotte Wilder, which I highly recommend. She works for Fox Sports, and she talked about how she's not rooting for the virus, but the people that are rooting for the virus, I believe it was the people that are rooting for the virus, the ones who don't believe it, or something like that. It was basically saying that if you don't believe this virus is real, then you are essentially rooting for the virus to ruin college football. And so I just thought that was interesting. Keep that in mind. I feel like on here, I try to be as realistic as possible. And while I obviously want college football, I want it more than anything. My internship literally relies on college football. I also recognize what's going on in the world. And there's a lot more going on than that besides the pandemic. There's a lot of social stuff we can get into today, as well as a football rundown, because this is our first episode where we have football to recap. Woo! In my outline here, I have football is back! Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. Waking up on Saturday morning and having college game day. Oh, the best feeling. I'm so excited. I'm going to talk about like my college football morning routine later on, because I just have a whole ritual down. But let's get to our rundown. We're going to recap this weekend, games, the big games played, big players of the week, top stars, and more. We're going to go into a news breakdown of what's going on, as well as some power rankings and all that jazz. And then we'll be previewing this weekend because the Big Ten and ACC kick off their season. And we're going to end it off with a top 10 SEC games on the schedule this season. So without further ado, everybody, let us get into this week's episode. So we had a wild weekend of games. You could say nothing too riveting and exciting. It was a lot of AAC teams, Sun Belt, just the whole shebang. It was not one of the bigger weekends, I guess you could say, which kind of makes me sad because a lot of people didn't know that there was college football, but there was, and it was very exciting. Do you guys have any fun morning routines you have? If you guys don't know what College Game Day is, it is the pregame show run by ESPN. I'm not biased, but I truly do think it's one of the best pregame shows on television. I thought it was fantastic. It always is. I think it's really interesting to see, too, what they're doing in these times of COVID and how they're dealing with that. But yeah, my little morning routine, like I mentioned, I like to wake up pretty early because I want to work out before I lay on the couch all day. And then I really enjoy spinning or going for a long run on Saturdays. And then I'll shower, obviously. And then I like to drink my coffee while I have my computer open, writing down stuff for the games and just watching College Game Day. I drink my coffee. I make myself a nice bagel sandwich normally because it's a treat and it's Saturday and we've earned it. And I will sit down and watch College Game Day to my heart's content. And it's very great. I love it. I believe Laura Rutledge is one of the new hosts and she did a fantastic job, as well as all the analysts. But you guys already know College Game Day is like the mainstay of the college football pregame shows. So yeah, that was College Game Day this week, but let's get into some of the games. Like I said, not big games per se, but there are definitely some interesting ones. So we're going to kick it off with the recap of University of Alabama Birmingham versus Central Arkansas. It was 45-33, University of UAB. So let's go over some of Central Arkansas stats. Central Arkansas, they definitely tried. Their NFCS team, which was interesting, and UAB giving up 35 points to them, was not the best showing. But Braylon Smith for Central Arkansas had 25 of 46 for 193 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Leading for rushing for them was Kiera Crossley with 10 carries for 59 yards and average of 5.9 downs. Cameron Myers scored 1 touchdown for Central Arkansas. And leading in passing was Lujan Wimmingham with 6 receptions for 53 yards and 2 touchdowns. So for UAB, we have Tyler Johnston with 143 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Bryson LaCuro also played with 83 yards and 1 TD, going 7 for 9. Leading for rushing was Spencer Brown with 24 carries, 127 yards, and 1 TD, as well as Jermaine Brown Jr. He carried for 17 carries for 75 yards and 1 TD as well, and also Lucasius Stanley total added to the mix with 5 carries for 21 yards and 1 touchdown. So this game it started out with a failed field goal attempt by Central Arkansas. Austin Watkins of UAB did lead the charge. It was definitely one of the closer games of the weekend. And as always within the past, with what we see with UAB is that Tyler Johnston of UAB, he looked good at first. He definitely had some passes. But then towards the end, after he threw 99 yards and a touchdown, he had a very ugly interception to start his quarterback woes. This was definitely one of the closer games of the weekend, I feel like you could say. There were 2 blowouts, which we won't get to, but this was definitely one of the closer games, I have to say. What did we learn from this? Like I said, so Tyler Johnston of UAB, he looked good at first. He had 99 yards and a touchdown, but as he was a lot last season, there was an ugly interception that started the QB woes. His interception was completely into traffic. Not a great throw, all I can say. But he seems to be the college Jameis Winston. Do you guys remember? Obviously, Jameis's fantastic 30-30 season, but he seems to be like a college Jameis. So they flip between Johnston and redshirt freshman Bryson LaCaro for the rest of the game as Johnson continued to struggle. LaCaro did add in a touchdown, but they flipped back and forth, trying to figure out the offense, I guess. But both QBs for UAB struggled with mobility, and they totaled only 3 yards on the ground. But the running game for UAB was fantastic with regards to their running back. Their offense was sparked by a trio of backs, Spencer Brown, Jermaine Brown Jr., and Lucasius Stanley. They accounted for 233 total rushing yards in the game. Brown entered his senior campaign with over 3,100 career rushing yards, was the best player on the field by far. He rushed for 127 yards and a touchdown on 24 carries. He's 6'4", 220 pounds, and very hard to bring down. But Central Arkansas is an FCS team, and giving up 35 points to them is not great, so UAB must improve on the defensive side. Let's go on to our next game that occurred this weekend, which happened Thursday, an interesting game. It was South Alabama versus Southern Mississippi. 32-21 South Alabama. Definitely an upset. What's big about this is after the game, Coach Jay Hobson retired. Or, he did not retire. He resigned from his position, which is kind of crazy. Here are going to the South Alabama stats. So, quarterback Desmond Trotter for the South Alabama. He had 229 yards, a 16 out of 27 completion, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Chance Lovertich of South Alabama also added 2 out of 3 throws for 64 yards and 1 TD. For rushing, the lead rusher for them was Carlos Davis with 15 carries, 85 yards, and 5.7 with an average of 5.7. Taryn Avery added 1 touchdown on 8 carries and 26 yards. But let's get into Southern Mississippi's stats. So for the passing there, we have Jack Abraham. He had 314 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. But Frank Gore Jr., the legendary Frank Gore's son, he had 32 yards on 12 carries. Don Ragsdale accounted for 1 touchdown, as well as Narcissus Driver. He had 1 carry for 1 touchdown, averaged 1 yard. But Frank Gore's son played and was the star running back, which is pretty dang cool. This was South Alabama's first road win in 3 years. Absolutely crazy. Coach Steve Campbell said, "It's a great win for us. It's a great way to start the season. After all these young men have been through to go on the road, we exercised that demon and we were able to get a road win. And I loved the way the guys played." Desmond Trotter accounted for 299 yards and 2 touchdowns for South Alabama, which went on the road for the first time under Campbell. Both touchdowns came to Jalen Torba, who got 6 passes for 169 yards. South Mississippi was seen as a 15.5 favorite before the game. It was a shocking victory and start of a crazy season. I mean, this is just going to be a crazy season all around. And next up on our games from this past weekend, we have Marshall and Eastern Kentucky. Not much to say here. Marshall won 59-0, a blowout, a bagel, as they would refer to it, is in tennis. But someone tweeted and they were like, at least Eastern Kentucky is getting physical exercise, which I see. The stats for Eastern Kentucky, not much to say here. The stats for Marshall: Grant Wells had 307 yards, 4 touchdowns. Luke Zabin had 38 yards and 1 touchdown. And Eastern Kentucky was a team to look out for because they were a state school during the pandemic, but they struggled greatly. That's really the only note, is that they're one of the only state schools that played. They're the only state school that played this weekend, I believe. So, kind of exciting. Another blowout was Middle Tennessee versus Army, 42-0 Army. Nothing to talk about here. Let's move on. Go Army, go military. Not go military, but you know what I mean. SMU versus Texas State. This was 31-24 SMU. This was a good game, people. I thoroughly enjoyed this game. I can't lie. It was on ESPN, a great afternoon game to watch, but let's go over some of the stats. So Shane Buechele for SMU had 367 yards on 26 out of 36 completion, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Lead running back TJ McDaniel had 130 yards on 27 carries with 1 touchdown. Ulysses Bentley had 11 carries for 49 yards and 2 touchdowns as well. And then for receiving, Rashae Rice had 5 receptions for 101 yards, and Reggie Robinson Jr. had 6 receptions for 99 yards and 1 touchdown. Texas State quarterback Brady McBride accounted for 21 completions out of 39 attempts, 227 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Running was there with Calvin Hill for 13 carries for 100 yards. Brock Struis added a touchdown in there on 14 carries and 95 yards. And receiving was Travis Graham with 3 receptions for 59 yards. It was all about SMU's defense in this game, let me put it that way. SMU recorded 7 tackles for loss, 1 interception, and a touchdown, a turnover on downs, in a game that was widely expected to be an offensive shootout, though. Neither team put a point on the board in the first quarter. Kyle Granson had a 53-yard score callback because of a blindside block by Reggie Robinson Jr. It was the best early chance. Here's a quote from quarterback Buechele. "We knew it wasn't going to be perfect, but we knew we had a lot of stuff to fix. I'm happy with how we played today. Our defense really showed up in the second half, and on offense, we just got to put them away. The offense did come alive in the second quarter. However, the surge came from the 2 touchdowns by Ulysses Bentley, both from inside the 10-yard line, that gave SMU a 7-0 lead and a 14-7 lead. Bentley shared carries with starter TJ McDaniel as well, who had a 9-yard touchdown rush of his own in the third quarter. Here's what Dykes had to say. "We were able to run the football to have a chance. We need to run the football to have a chance. It's kind of our thought coming into the game. We are going to have to run it to win it. I think we probably ran it probably well enough to win the game." Texas State responded to the first SMC scores. One response was on an acrobatic backwards dive, which is pretty damn cool, by Jamar Hayes. Excuse me. And this was a hot night in Texas. Obviously, they were in Texas. They were playing at Texas State. Both head coaches said players were feeling cramping and fatigue. It was a defensive game. Want to point out that many fans in the crowd were not wearing masks. They populated in other sections. The home side was more crowded. The SMU players wore helmets with a visor in front of them to mitigate the COVID-19 risk. And everyone's on SMU travel squad tested negative for COVID 3 times this week. It didn't feel like a normal game. Head coach from Texas State, Jake Spittle, said, "When you pull up and there's no one in the parking lot, you pull up and it's just crickets. I don't think it will ever feel like a true game day, but hey, we got to call the plays and run around and we had some fun with it. It might have been weird. It might not have been the real thing, but it was football in September, college football in September. It wasn't really pretty at that times, but overall, I think it was a good win." So that was probably the most exciting game we had this weekend, I have to say. Obviously SMU made a surprise run last year, and they're looking to make another surprise run this year. It'll be very interesting to see how it works. And another game to go into is BYU Navy. This was the Labor Day game. The Monday night Labor Day game. I came into this rooting for Navy because of my granddad. Obviously, this was an absolute shootout, 55-3 BYU. On the passing side for BYU, Zach Wilson had 232 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception on 13 completions. Rushing, we had Tyler Allgeier for 14 carries, 132 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Zachary Katoa had 10 carries for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns. Excuse me. And then for Navy, we had Dalen Morris had 2 completions on 16 yards, and Perry Olsen had 2 completions on 14 yards. Miles Fell had 3 carries for 55 yards, and Jimmy Crothis had 9 carries for 28 yards. Kirk Herbstreit, the regarded ESPN analyst, said Monday he believes the Cougars can make a run for the playoffs. Are the Cougars that good, or were the Navy shipmen just that bad? That is the big question we have out of that game. So what are the big takeaways? This won't be a normal season. We already saw that. We saw it this weekend, and many players commented on it. They thought it was a scrimmage and whatnot. But as bigger games kick off this weekend, quote-unquote bigger games, it'll be interesting to see how the excitement is. Because in my personal life, not a lot of people seemed too excited, and not many people knew football was even happening this weekend, which is kind of sad. I mean, I was excited about it, but I know many people weren't. Big players from this weekend. Let's get into it. So, BYU's Zach Wilson and Marshall's Grant Wells at quarterback, BYU's Tyler Allgeier and Rashee Rice for SMU. And notable running back, Frank Gore Jr. for Southern Miss had a good touchdown, but it didn't count. So with that, guys, we'll get into our next segment coming up. That was a recap of this weekend's games. Did you enjoy that? Did you have fun? The whole shebang. But yes, coming up, stay tuned because we're going to get into a recap of news that has happened in the past few days. So stay tuned.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we are back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that little break from my voice. I know I did. All right, so let's get into some news that we have going on in college football. I usually have this as my first segment, but obviously this was the first week that we had games, which made it very important to make that the first segment. Excuse me. So, also, apologies. It is very hot in here. I'm a little out of breath. So, let's get into some news here, people. We have Jay Hopson resign after one game. So, as I mentioned previously, the Southern Mississippi head coach, Jay Hopson, has resigned from his position just one game into the 2020 college football season. Athletic Director Jeremy McCain announced on Monday. Offensive coordinator Scotty Wildman will take over as interim head coach of the Golden Eagles. Hopson took over the Southern Mississippi program prior to 2016. He went 28-3 overall and 20-12 in Conference USA play over the last 4+ seasons. He led the Golden Eagles to 3 bowl games, but never finished higher than second place in the CUSA West Division. He served as an assistant coach with the program from 2001 to 2003 and 2005 to 2007. Here's a statement from McCain. Coach Hopson came over to me last Thursday to discuss what was on his heart, and after much decision over the weekend, he and I agreed that new leadership for our program is needed, McCain said. Coach Hopson has been a part of our program for 10 years. I appreciate his commitment to Southern Miss and wish Jay and his family nothing but the best. Very interesting to say the least. I mean, this is the first head coach to resign. I guess you could say it's unclear. It sounds like he did resign, but it also sounds like there was some other stuff going on behind the scenes. Very interesting. On to our next news segment of the day. We have BYU and Navy. It felt like a quote-unquote scrimmage. So if you guys, as I mentioned in the last segment, BYU Navy was a blowout, 55-3, favoring BYU. Excuse me. The national anthem was sung by the Naval Academy Glee Club, was played on the video board with both teams off the field. It was eerily quiet when the midshipmen did take the field, and as you guys may not know, Notre Dame was supposed to play Navy in Ireland on August 29th. The game was then moved in the summer to Labor Day weekend in Annapolis. When the Irish decided to play in the as an ACC member this season, they were not allowed to play a non-conference game on the road. BYU lost its opener against Utah when the Pac-12 decided to play a league-only schedule before eventually shutting down. In search of an opponent, the schools quickly came together and found themselves in a showcase just more than a month later. Late last week, the NCAA Chief Medical Advisor, Brian Hainline, spoke on plans of the other 3 Power 5 conferences. The Pac-12 followed in the Big 12's path and elected to pull the plug on the season. These plans include testing 3 times per week, including 2 virtual PCR tests and cardiac monitoring. So this is regards to the health and safety concerns of the season regarding coronavirus. Also, just in a few minutes ago, news came out that a college football player from the California University of Washington, I believe, so Jamin Stevens of California University of Pennsylvania has died due to coronavirus complications. So this is the first big college football player to pass away. He would have turned 21 on September 21st, and see, it said COVID-19 complications. That is all we know so far. So very sad, but again, this is the first kind of big college football player to pass away or be open about having COVID-19. So very sad, but Hainline, like he said, is confident in these plans and their ability to follow these conferences to play football at all despite the pandemic. Excuse me. So, yeah, Notre Dame and BYU definitely feel like a scrimmage. You could see it. We've never been in a stadium like this. Navy coach Ken Numatialo, I believe that's how you say his name, said in a statement. Hainline says, I've worked closely with the SEC, Big 12, ACC, and all of the autonomy of 5 conferences. The final recommendations were exactly aligned with the NCAA's decision. So I'm highly confident from a decision-making point of view with regards to football. Nobody is denying any facts. Again, highly respected individuals are looking at the data. Some of it's, you take a risk if you do this and a risk if you don't. That sort of tolerance, you have to play it out. Ultimately, the virus is going to decide. So again, that was a statement from Hainline regarding the coronavirus. I think that is the safe-ish approach to to coronavirus. Obviously, there are a lot of risks to take. It just depends if you want to take a risk and have it potentially kill you or not. Obviously, we just saw it has killed a player, COVID-19 complications, and it's very sad. But furthermore, I'm sorry. There was an interesting article from the Waco Tribune I also want to touch upon. So it touches upon the broadcasting implications of football this season. So Ilian Ben-Han, who oversees ESPN's 4 college networks, said broadcasters will need to be flexible about postponements, cancellations, and other changes for the foreseeable future. We've had day-to-day and hour-to-hour discussions with conference partners. It is really just a matter of being responsive and solution-oriented. It is up to the leagues, and they will do what they do best. We are a media partner. It's up to the schools and the conference if they want to stage events. We're excited for it to get going, and we will keep our fingers crossed. Tag Garson, a senior vice president at Wasserman Sports, said the biggest storyline going into the season isn't about any teams or players. With all the twists and turns, the season itself is the story. My primary hope is that we can go through it without any issues, which is just what is disrupted is likely to change from week to week. So again, that goes back to the broadcasting side of it. I think the business side of college football is very interesting, I must say. And it'll be interesting to see how the television network play out with this. But in other big news, Oregon top offensive tackle Penny Sewell will opt out for the rest of his college career and start preparing for the NFL draft. The 6'6", 331-pound All-Star is expected to be a lock for the top 5 overall in the 2021 NFL draft and is projected to be number 2 behind Trevor Lawrence if Lawrence decides to leave early. I'm going to read out his statement from Penny Sewell. There are no words to adequately express how blessed I am to have played football for the last 2 seasons at the best school in the country, the University of Oregon. The love and support I have received has been overwhelming, and I could not be more grateful. But since I was little, I've dreamt of playing professional football. Accordingly, after long thought, prayer, and many conversations with my family, I've decided to opt out of the 2020 to 2021 college football season and prepare for the NFL draft. He goes on to thank the academic staff, the medical staff, the coaches, Coach Cristobal, and to his teammates, he said, "My brother's in battle. It hurts me deeply to know I won't be suiting up and playing with y'all brothers, but know that you will keep your eye on the prize and strive for greatness." He thanks the fans, and he tweeted, "Sewell strong, signing out, all love." So again, that was the big opt-out news from this past week. So more players opting out. Like I've said, I feel like we will see more players opt out in the near weeks coming, especially more Pac-12 and Big Ten players. As I touched upon a few weeks ago, the Big Ten was thinking of a Thanksgiving schedule, but it looks like that is not a possibility. And the Pac-12 has announced that an October start or anything like that is not possible. And I think that, so the Pac-12 has decided not to play early football. Again, the postponement timeline and phrasing they put out is definitely just not a cover, but it's something they're using to kind of, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but the odds of them playing football. Obviously, also, I want to say that the NFL is starting tomorrow or today when you're listening to this, and I feel like at the beginning of kind of the school season, I was very skeptical on students staying on campus. I've talked about this a lot, but I do not feel safe going back to Boulder, and it's kind of funny now that my friends were like, I kind of have to make a routine for myself. I kind of have to, like, learn how to be a student here. I can't really just be like, it's not going to happen. I'm going to get sent home. They've been there for almost a month now, yeah, and they haven't been sent home yet. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. And college football is happening. Like, again, I believe there should not be players and fans in stands. This is obviously up to the discretion of the school to make the decision, but I don't think that having fans is the safest. Obviously, we saw with SMU, not many were wearing masks. People were traveling. And I just think not having fans is, like, the best option. Like we saw at BYU, Navy. It's going to feel weird. There's no doubt about that. This is a weird college football season. It is going to be strange, especially for schools like Boulder that aren't having football, and Ohio State, and it stinks. And you're seeing more and more Big Ten people come out in protest of that. Like, Jim Harbaugh came out in the past week and protested it. And there's a lot of anger and frustration going on in the world, and we're feeling that to college football. But with regards to that, Trevor Lawrence has tweeted out a 5-step plan a few days ago. Clemson QB Trevor Lawrence posted a 5-point plan on social media with the hashtag change, outlining what he and other players are looking to do for the 2020 college football season. including registering and having time to vote, discussions with college powers about awareness of racial injustice, discussing with local community leaders and police departments, helping the community, and raising awareness on game days. Here is his statement. Over the course of the past year, our country has witnessed some of the most atrocious racial injustices against countless Black and African American people. Too many have fallen victim to racial injustice and systemic inequalities. Enough is enough. Real change must come. As we return to our respective campuses and most of us suit up into pads for the 2020 college football season, we realize that the power we have to enact this change. We, the players, have a voice, and we must use it to drive our injustice, improve our communities, and inspire the future generations. # our voice matters. The next slide that he tweeted out was his step-by-step plan. We stand together, united, to bring about a positive change to our campuses, our communities, our country, as we represent different campuses and communities. Actions will be flexible, but the goal is for all of us to make things better where we are. Below is our 5-point plan for accountable steps to create real change. Number 1, instill all of our teammates are registered to vote and have November 3rd free from athletic obligations so we can all vote. Discuss with our presidents and administration to further raise awareness about racial injustice and create initiatives to further empower our communities. Create community outreach and initiatives via clothing, food, school supply, and book drives, as well as amplify current local organizations that are benefiting communities. Normalize having routine conversations about change, policing, legal rights, addressing racial injustice, etc. between college football teams and our representative police departments, local governments, and community leaders to build trust and empathy. On game days, we want to use our platform to raise awareness via wearing a shirt, utilizing statements on our helmets and jerseys, and playing tribute videos to recognize victims of racial injustice and share their own stories. So again, that was Trevor Lawrence. He tweeted out this 5-step plan. This was in conjunction with other college football leaders that have spoken out about the racial injustice going on in this country, which is frankly just disgusting, in my opinion. There's no way to look around that. And I really commend Trevor Lawrence for using his platform the way he has, because he is the most notable quarterback in college football this season, especially since Justin Fields is not playing and Jamie Newman is out for the season. But I really commend him for this. It was interesting to look at the tweet replies from this tweet. I don't know, just made me kind of sad that people are still, saying stick to sports or etc., because they have a platform, and their platform is bigger than throwing a football around. They have a platform to use their voice, and I commend them for using it. But speaking of which, on College Game Day this past weekend, Kirk Herbstreit, one of ESPN's most respected college football analysts and most respected analyst and play-by-play guys in the game in general, gave an emotional speech about racial injustice that made me tear up as a white woman. I was taken aback by the vulnerability, and I really resonated with it. I'm going to read some of his quotes. He said, "How can you listen to these stories and not feel pain? And not, I want to help. You can't relate to them if you're white, but you can help. And I want to help. This is not okay. It's just not. We need to do better." So that was, again, Kirk Herbstreit. His speech went a lot longer than that, but I really liked how he pointed out that you can't relate to them if you're white, but you can help, because I think that's a huge thing that I have struggled with wanting to help as much as I can, but feeling like it is not the right place for me to help because I am a white woman, because I have all this privilege in life, and I just feel like I shouldn't be the ones to help. So I really commend Kirk Herbstreit for standing up. The media world reacted, showing praise for him, which I really respected as well. You could see that his co-analysts were very taken aback as well. And yeah, it was a very emotional week, I guess you could say, for... it was a very emotional week, if you will. And just because the racial injustice isn't making the headlines as much anymore does not mean we can't still talk about it. We shouldn't still talk about it. This season is going to be the season of player movement and player empowerment and making a change in any way we can. And I want to commend Kirk Herbstreit and Trevor Lawrence and everyone else in the media for making a difference. I hope I can do my best to impact you guys and to make you consider and remember to vote. Go out and vote is so important. And so... yeah, that's kind of the big news that happened this week. Kind of a slower news week. I feel like having the Southern Mississippi head coach opt out of the season after one game was interesting. Have we seen that recently? I feel like there's always usually like one coach during the season that decides to opt out randomly. But other than that, kind of just been kind of in a slow, quiet week. But coming up, we're going to go over the ESPN Power Predictor for the top 25 playoff predictor. We're also going to go preview this upcoming weekend in college football and go over some protocols that teams have used. So stick around.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And we are back, everybody, with our third segment today. We're going to be previewing this upcoming weekend in college football, all that fun pizzazz, as well as looking at playoff predictors. And we're going to go over what the SEC is doing for their protocol this year. Well, not this year, I guess this season, with regards to coronavirus. So let's kick it off today with ESPN's playoff predictor. They came out with this little fun piece of information, so I'm going to go through it. And it basically gives the top 25 chances of making the playoffs. So at number one, obviously, we have Clemson at 88%. They are seen as the number one favorite to make it this year. Many people are already counting them in. I am as well. National championship game percentage, 63.5. Win percent, 41.3. And their first game is at Wake Forest this Saturday. At number two, we have the Alabama Crimson Tide at 76.5%. They have a 52.3% chance of getting to the national championship game and a winning percentage of winning it all at 29.8%. At number three, we have the Georgia Bulldogs at 39.9% with an 18.4% chance of making it to the championship game and a 7.8% chance of winning it all. At number four, we have the Oklahoma Sooners with a 29.5% chance of making it to the playoffs, a 10.7% chance of making it to the national championship game, and 3.3% chance of winning it all. At number five, we have the Texas Longhorns at 28.7% chance, 10.1% chance to make the national title game, and a 3.2% chance to win the whole thing. At number six, we have the UCF Knights at 27.2% chance to make the playoffs, 8.1% to make it to the national championship game, and 2.5% chance to win it all. At number seven, we have the Auburn Tigers at 26.1%. with a 10.7% chance of winning it, of going to the national championship game, and a 3.8% chance of winning it all. At number 8, we have the LSU Tigers with a 23.7% chance of making it to the game, a 9.4% chance of making it to the national championship game, a 3.3% chance of winning it all. They were the winners last year, but obviously since Joe Burrow was gone, their chances have decreased. At number 9, we have the Florida Gators with a 22.5% chance of making it to the national championship game, of making it to the playoffs, with a 8.2% chance of making it to the national championship game, and a 2.9% chance of winning it all. And lastly, we have the BYU Cougars at number 10 with an 8.3% chance of making it to the playoff, a 1.3% chance of making it to the national championship game, and a 0.3% chance. Like I said, they won against Navy 55-3. So that's the first 10. As ESPN previously noted, this playoff predictor is based off of a number of factors, including number of losses, conference championships, the Power Football Index, and the selection committee. After dominating Navy, BYU jumped 57 spots with its playoff chances, surely aided by the lack of Big Ten and Pac-12 programs. Teams that missed being among the top 10 include Texas A&M, Notre Dame, Oklahoma State, and Louisville. But let's look at this weekend's games, everybody. I'm going to read you through what we have this weekend and what to look out for. So we have Charlotte at Appalachian State. We have Louisiana Tech at Baylor, TA, University of Texas, San Antonio at Texas State, UTEP at Texas, Western Kentucky University at Louisville, Louisiana at Iowa State, Charlotte at Appalachian State, ULM at Army, Arkansas State at Kansas State, Campbell at Georgia Southern, University of Texas. Oh, I see. Sorry. Excuse me. I was reading this all wrong. And let's get into the ACC games for this week because they kick off. We have UAB at Miami. On Saturday, we have Syracuse at North Carolina, Duke at Notre Dame, Georgia Tech at Florida State, Austin Peay at Pitt, Clemson at Wake Forest, WKU at Louisville. And for the Big 12 this weekend, we have Louisiana at Iowa State, Eastern Kentucky at West Virginia, Louisiana Tech at Baylor, Arkansas State at Kansas State, Missouri State at Oklahoma, UTEP at Texas, Houston Baptist at Texas Tech, and Coastal Carolina at Kansas. So the Oklahoma State Tulsa opener was pushed back a week. I'm going to read a statement from the universities on that. The safety and health of our student athletes is always at the core of all of our decisions and discussions and decisions. Without time to properly prepare physically, we would be putting our student athletes at a greater risk of injury. Tulsa Athletic Director Derek Gagg said in a statement, "The open date for both schools presented us with the opportunity to release the game for a week later. I am appreciative of Mike Holder and Oklahoma State University for their cooperation in coming to this decision. The announcement comes less than a month after Tulsa temporarily paused workouts in mid-August after 8 players tested positive for COVID-19. Another 8 players who came into direct contact with again, this announcement comes less than a month after Tulsa temporarily paused workouts in mid-August after 8 players tested positive for COVID-19. Another 8 players who came in direct contact with the positive cases were also in quarantine. Pausing practice for any period of time, though it's unknown over the past few months, affects preparation. Already in Week 1, Middle Tennessee, Navy, and Eastern Kentucky have been examples of what happens when an overmatched or unprepared team tries to take the field. This occurred after Tulsa experienced a spike in cases." So that's what we're looking out for this weekend, people. Excuse me, Those are the big games to look out for. Obviously, we have Clemson kicking off against Wake Forest State. We have Florida State kicking off Pitt. We've got some bigger games this weekend, which is very exciting for all of us at the college football. But let's go over some of the regulations that the SEC has put in for fans in the stadiums. I've talked about this, but I do not believe there should be fans in stadiums because I want college football to happen, and I believe having fans in stadiums is not the safest decision. But Alabama, the University of Alabama, announced on August 18th that seating at football games would be socially distanced, resulting in about 20% capacity at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Auburn announced that they would have the same thing, approximately 20%. Arkansas would probably have 21 to 23% of capacity. Florida would have about 20%. Georgia would have 20%, 25%. Kentucky has not announced exact percentages. LSU, they've said in a statement they're going to urge fans without tickets to not come to campus. Mississippi State announced 25% capacity. Mizzou announced 25% capacity. Ole Miss announced 25% capacity. South Carolina announced 25% capacity. Tennessee announced 25% capacity. Texas A&M announced 25% capacity. Vanderbilt has not announced anything. So, that is some of the SEC. Oh, yes. And Mississippi State said 25%. I believe I already said that. Excuse me. But those are the regulations. So, how's this going to work? I believe that they're going to only give tickets to donors and fans of the teams. Obviously, I also think that, having fans in stands is not necessarily the best idea. I think that we saw what happened on Saturday with SMU, and I think that just having fans in stadiums is not the best. It's really unsafe, not sanitary, and just not a good idea. But again, I am not in charge here. And yeah, so that's some big things to look out for this weekend. We got some very exciting games coming up. Are you guys excited for this weekend? Do you even have plans for this weekend? I feel like it's the first real weekend of college football, which is oh so exciting to me. I can't even sing. I'm such a bad singer. I don't know why I'm even singing right now. That's honestly embarrassing. Anyways, people, coming up, we got a fun little top 10 list for you all of the top 10 SEC games of the season to look out for, so stick around.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Hello everybody, and we are back. Today's going to be a shorter episode if you cannot tell. Light on news, light on topics, things to talk about. Not going to bore y'all here. This next episode I'm sure will be a fun one because we have college football back this weekend. I'm so excited. I'll be recording that episode on Saturday afternoon right after the big games happen. So, that'll go out on Monday. We'll all be caught up and everything. But let's go through the top 10 games, SEC games of this season to look out for. At number 10, we have Mississippi State versus LSU. So Mississippi State is going to be utilizing transfer quarterback KJ Costello, who is a transfer from the University of Stanford. Costello started 25 games at Palo Alto and was a second-team All-Pac-12 quarterback in 2018. He didn't really build off that success in 2018, and his season was cut short by injury. He is now in charge. He now has Mike Leach in charge, as his head coach, which dates back to the Pac-12 days. And he has the second most starts in the division behind Kellen Mond. So will Mike Leach's aired-out philosophy work in the SEC? There are definitely doubts about it, but it will be annoying people to deal with. It's very offensive-driven, whereas I feel the SEC is definitely more of a defensive-driven conference. Excuse me. But also, we have LSU, who's going to be a little weaker on this side now that they've lost some of their key players, and their star wide receiver has opted out of the season, as well as some key defensive players, so that's going to be something to look out for. But they are still seen as the favorite, and it's a big early game. It's occurring on September 26th, so it's definitely a bigger early game to look out for. At number 9, we have the Georgia-Florida game on November 7th. This feels kind of low on the list for such a classic rivalry game. But it's played in Jacksonville, Florida. It is occurring on November 7th, and Florida has a chance to prove themselves this year with Kyle Trask at the helm and Georgia uncertain with JT Daniels at quarterback now that Jamie Newman has opted out. Florida fans are relentless. This isn't technically a home game for anyone, I believe, or if it is, it's probably for Florida. This is not, but as we all know, Florida fans are relentless and very tiring. At number 8, we have Georgia-Alabama. On October 17th, this is a rematch of the 2018 SEC Championship. The two Southern schools first met in 1895 in Columbus, Georgia. Georgia defeated Alabama by a score of 30-6. The teams did not meet again until 1901, another Georgia win. Then they continued to meet on a regular basis for the next several decades. The teams played each other every season from 1944 to 1965. And here's where it gets interesting. In 1963, the Saturday Evening Post reported that Alabama coach Paul Bear Bryant and Georgia athletic director and former coach Willie Bart had conspired to fix the 62 game, which Alabama won 35-0. After the story broke, Butts resigned as the athletic director, though Butts and Bryant denied the allegations. The two sued the magazine's publisher for libel, and this case reached the U.S. Supreme Court as the Curtis Publishing Company through Butts. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of Butts, with the publisher eventually being ordered to pay more than $3 million in damage. Following the scandal, the school decided to cut its annual series after the 1965 game. The school only sporadically played since, including 4 meetings from 1971 to 1982, an era in which the Tiger Bulldogs won at least a share of each SEC title. That was, again, from a Wikipedia article. This is always a close matchup. This is a rematch of some classic games we've had over the last few seasons, so it'll be very interesting to see how this goes. At number 7, we have Texas A&M versus Alabama, the University of Alabama Roll Tide. Jimbo Fisher, could he be on the hot seat? This is his third full season entering as the head coach of the Texas A&M Aggies. The game I will always remember with Alabama was the Johnny Manziel game on November 10th, 2012, where Texas A&M won 29-24. Since then, it's been all dominated by Alabama, obviously. Last year, it was 47-28. There have been mostly blowouts, not really close games. The closest game was in 2013 when Alabama won 49-42. Again, I believe Manziel? No, Manziel was not there. Could Jimbo Fisher be on the hot seat? He's entering his third season as a coach. Always a close contest. It's not really close and contested battle, but it's a good rivalry game. It's on October 3rd, exciting, and Kellen Mond will have a lot to prove in this big matchup. There's been a lot of talk about him and his skills and what he can do as a player, but he's not really given much. At number 6, we have LSU versus Auburn on Halloween, October 31st. It's year 7 for Gus Malzahn in Auburn, Alabama. The 2019 season was a mixed bag for him and the other Tigers. The good thing is that they beat Alabama, which will always constitute a good season. The bad news is that their 4 other losses last year were by a touchdown or less. Auburn lost to LSU by 3 points, and, they only lost by 3 points. That's pretty good against the national championships. But Gus Malzahn brought in former Arkansas head coach Chad Morris, or as the Hogs call him, he who shall not be named, the offensive coordinator, and Kevin Steele keeps on as the Tigers' defensive coordinator. Bo Nix is back for his sophomore season as Auburn's starting quarterback. He won the SEC Freshman of the Year over Drew Stingley, which the biggest, most notable difference of the 2020 Auburn Tigers will be the absence of stud Derek Brown. Brown was the 8th pick in the April draft by the Panthers, and Marlon Davidson was taken in the 2nd draft by the Falcons. The Tigers do get Big Cat Bryant back for another season, so they will at least have one kick-ass Auburn defensive lineman in a single-digit jersey. But that is a big game to watch out for. 2 very good teams, both ranked in the top 10 right now in the ESPN playoff predictor. Like I said, big game to look out for. It's happening on Halloween. I assume that'll be a Halloween night game as well on CBS, so that's an exciting game to look out for. At number 5, we have Tennessee-Auburn. Not the most exciting matchup, but one of the better ones we'll have that weekend. It was definitely more of a dry weekend. It's the weekend kind of before the big rivalry game, so figured it'd be a little interesting. But not the most exciting matchup, but definitely one to look out for. At number 4, we have Georgia-South Carolina on November 28th. This is one of the biggest rivalries. Georgia has 3 main rivals, Georgia Tech, Auburn, and Florida. The schools played periodically until South Carolina's entrance into the SEC in 1992. Mostly their recruiting battles here, and Georgia's fan base has disliked former South Carolina head coach Steve Spurrier since his days as head coach of the University of Florida. The series between the 2 schools became especially competitive during the Steve Spurrier year, where Spurrier's Gamecocks holding an almost perfectly even 5-6 record against Georgia. The game has been nationally televised to large audiences. And here's what Steve Spurrier had to say about the Bulldogs in 2012. They've got more rivals than almost anybody I know. They really do. Traditionally, we've only had Clemson because we've never really beaten anyone enough to have more rivals. Georgia, I always say, is our biggest conference rival since they're closest to us, I think, than any other school. So it's a big rivalry. In 2018, the last game they played, undefeated number 3 Georgia came in as a 24.5 favorite at home against unranked South Carolina. South Carolina had lost 3 games, including one to North Carolina, who had previously gone 2-9 in 2018. Shockingly, South Carolina upset Georgia 20-17 in overtime behind Israel Minnick's 3 interceptions. And South Carolina would only win one more game after this against Vanderbilt and finish 4-8. Georgia would go on to finish 12-2 and lose the SEC championship to LSU, but would rebound by beating Baylor in the Sugar Bowl. At number 3, so that's definitely one of the more exciting ones. At number 3, we have South Carolina at LSU. This game is occurring little before the South Carolina-Georgia game. It's just exciting. Any game with LSU is exciting. I believe this will be a blowout in LSU's favor. But again, it is very exciting with Ryan Helinski at quarterback for South Carolina. At number 2, you guys are getting to the final 2 big games. And again, I'm sorry this is a shorter episode. I feel like I keep saying that. I'm very sorry. I've just been struggling to think of content for you guys, and I'm really trying to work on that. So Saturday's episode will be very exciting. But at number 2, we have Auburn versus Alabama. The big game. We all know this one. It's one of the biggest rivalries in college football. This game is happening on November 28th. It's known as the Iron Bowl. And between 1969 and 1987 made, excuse me. What am I reading? Sorry, I have these excerpts pulled up. Some of the big notable games from this series include 2013, with 1 second remaining in the game, tied 28-28. Alabama freshman kicker Adam Griffith attempted a 57-yard potential game-winning field goal. The kick fell short, and Auburn quarterback Chris Davis caught the ball at the back of the end zone and returned it for 109 yards for game-winning touchdown. It was as what is famously known as the Kick Six game. The 2013 Iron Bowl won the ESPY Award for Best Game of the Year in any sport, and the final play by Davis won the ESPY Award for Best Play of the Year. 2014 number 1 Alabama defeated number 15 Auburn 55-44, the highest scoring Iron Bowl ever. 2017 number 6 Auburn defeated number 1 Alabama 26-14, the largest margin of victory over Alabama since 1969. And in 2019, number 15 Auburn defeated number 5 Alabama 48-45 in a classic back-and-forth match. Alabama missed a field goal late in the fourth quarter. They doinked off the upright that would have tied the game. On the next possession, Auburn faced fourth down with more than 1 minute on the clock. Auburn's punter lined up as a wide receiver. Alabama was confused by the penalty and confused by the formation and received a penalty for having too many players on the field. The result gave Auburn a new set of downs and the chance to end the game by running out of the remaining time. With this loss, Alabama would be knocked out of the playoffs for the first time since 2014. This also marks the first time Alabama has had 2 or more regular season losses since 2010. So Auburn, Alabama, big game. We all know this. The Kick Six lives on in our mind as one of the greatest plays in college football. But what is the number 1 game to look out for this season? Let's recap before we go on. At number 10 on our list, we will have LSU, Mississippi State on September 26th. At number 9, we have Georgia, Florida on November 7th. At number 8, we have Georgia, Alabama on October 17th. At number 7, we have Texas A&M and Alabama on October 3rd. At number 6, we have LSU, Auburn on October 31st. At number 5, we have Tennessee, Auburn on November 21st. At number 4, we have Georgia, South Carolina on November 28th. At number 3, we have South Carolina, LSU. At number 2, we have Auburn versus Alabama, like I just said. And at number 1, what do we have of none other than Alabama, LSU on November 14th. This is one of the biggest matchups in college football every single year. It's electric no matter where it's held. In 2015, one of the biggest matchups in recent history involved LSU and Alabama. These games are always exciting. They're always very defensive games as well. And in 2018, the two teams faced off for the second game of the century of the decade as LSU defeated number 1 LSU defeated number 2 Alabama. This game was the top 2 quarterback prospects and Heisman Trophy candidates in Tua Tagovailoa and Joe Burrow. The Tigers never trailed over the course of the game and outscored Alabama 23-6 in the second quarter to lead 33-13 at halftime. The Tigers ended up winning 46-41. The Tide pulled back in the second quarter. It was one of the biggest games of the century, in all honesty. This basically collapsed Alabama's chances of making it into the college football playoffs last year. There's a lot of revenge factor going into here, obviously, with Nick Saban. Oh, excuse me, my charger just fell. So there you have it, guys. Those are the Big Ten games to look out for in this upcoming college football season. What did you think? Are you excited for the season? I am pumped, personally. I'm so excited. The SEC football is nothing else like it. I always want to go to an SEC school because of that, but anyways, I hope you guys all stay healthy and safe on this lovely Thursday when you're listening to this. I hope you all are happy, spending time with your friends and family, getting schoolwork done. I am swamped with school, to say the least. It is like the 3rd week, and I'm already overwhelmed and stressed, but that's okay. That's what I get for taking 21 credits. Anyways, thank you so much for tuning into the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. As always, could you please leave a review on iTunes and wherever you listen? That would greatly help us and appreciate this. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on our social medias on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Thank you guys so much for listening. Have a great night, and I will talk to you guys all on Monday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network, from football to basketball, baseball to MMA, and even soccer. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast.